Well, hello there. How are you? It's another episode of driving with me for Syngap. So it's Monday, I don't know, June, I think maybe 8th or 9th, I don't know. It's Monday. I just dropped Kasia off the ABA camp and we're going to go to a grocery store to pick up some groceries. Exciting stuff, you guys, exciting. I know you're excited with me, and we're going to talk about today what? Any guesses? Who knows? Raise your hand. No? Alright, we're gonna talk about CVI. CVI, cortical vision impairment in children with developmental disabilities, with individuals with developmental disabilities. You guys, I say children because I think of all of our kids, adults and kids and any age, I think of them as our children. So shoot me if you don't approve, but to me there's no difference between somebody who's 24 or 30 or somebody who's 7. I all consider them all my children. So that's how we're going to talk about it. May be not correct, but that's how I say, that's how I think of it. They're our children. Okay, so CVI in children with developmental disabilities, especially with Syngap1 disorder, well, Syngap1, the related disorders, that's another thing, you know. You gotta just bear with me. So it's something that I found. Well, let me tell you how did I get on the road to CVI, and why do I think it's vastly underdiagnosed in a population, in Syngap1 population, but also in a developmental disabilities, including patients with CP. I think there's more studies about CP and CVI than DDEs. So I think the scientists just realized earlier that patients with CP may have this brain disorder that is crucial for their vision. So for Kasia was diagnosed with sudden onset of nystagmus, which is a shaking of the eyes, and it was shaking this way, not this way, apparently this way. It's much worse. So so at 6 months old, her eyes started shaking, and you know, we live in Arizona. This can be due to like a scorpion bite. Scorpions have neurotoxin. That's the most common like sudden onset of nystagmus. It's a scorpion bite, but also can be caused by, I think I was looking it up, 145 different causes of nystagmus. But most common is brain tumors, right? So we rushed her into emergency room. She was 6 months. Her nanny actually noticed it. So, and they did a CT scan on her right away in emergency room, and they found nothing. So we got admitted to the hospital for emergency MRI, and we stayed there, I think maybe overnight or something like that. She did have an MRI, and the MRI of course was clear because, you know, the nystagmus was due to Syngap and we had no idea. So, and nobody had any idea. She was 6 months old, but because of this nystagmus diagnosis, her diagnostic journey was a little bit different maybe than typical child with Syngap1, because she for the longest time we thought, and all of her medical professionals thought, that her delays are due to nystagmus, which at the time was unknown origin, right? We didn't know what's the cause of nystagmus. So she did have, that early MRI, and she did have, a lot more tests. She did get a neurology consult, the neurologist right away, and then the onset of Syngap symptoms are about 6 months old. We mostly notice the delays at around 6 months old when they're not sitting quite right. So she did get PT, and for the longest time we thought that like she has balance issues, she can't crawl, she can't walk, and so forth, because she does have this nystagmus situation, and she can't talk because they have to walk before they talk. You know the drill. I mean, if you went through diagnostic journey, you know the drill of explaining why the child doesn't talk, because they don't walk yet. They focus on walking first, and all that stuff. So anyway, so we did have the ophthalmologist because of that, a pediatric ophthalmologist, and which most people, most patients at this age, they obviously don't have ophthalmologist, but because of that we did. And Kasia started to be followed by School for the Deaf and Blind, early intervention services. And at that time I just didn't really realize that her eyes are big deal. I mean, the nystagmus wasn't progressing to the point that it was getting worse. Actually, it was getting, it was stabilizing and getting better. She didn't have the typical, like, a null point that she would have to tilt her head in a certain way to see things more clearly. So we didn't know. So long story short, somewhere on the way we did get the Syngap diagnosis at 3 years old, and we're continuing to see ophthalmologists, right? So somewhere on the way we had, and forgive me, it's not a medical term, because in ophthalmology she had like multiple diagnoses, but I can't really pronounce and remember them all. So it's a lazy eye in a layman's terms. So she did develop lazy eye. We chemically patched one of her eyes, which worked for a little bit. Then at 5 years old, we did do surgery on both of her eyes for the lazy eye, and actually that did correct the issue. So because at this point, when she was 5, her doctor, and especially I, didn't feel like this chemical, patching of the eye, it's going to do, like we can't make her, because when you patch, when you cover the better eye, the most functioning eye, then you can cover with a patch, or you can cover with like an atropine drop to make it blurry, so for children like Kasia, it's mostly the chemical patch. So we had to do the drops, and she didn't, so she didn't see well in her good eye, and that made her not see well in both of her eyes, and anyway, if you have a problem with that, you know what that means. So we did do the surgery, and that corrected her lazy eye. And about that time too, when she was 5 years old and she was entering, and still she is being followed by this school for the blind in Arizona. So we do see the what's called TVI, teacher for visually impaired. Ever so often, at the beginning she was coming to our home and she was giving us different strategies. Then at 3 years old, when we did the IEP in the school district, Kasia went to the private preschool, but the school district did provide service to that private preschool, because it was private preschool within Head Start. So the school districts have to provide services to Head Start. So we did that, and she's been following by, you know, being followed by the School for the Blind and the TVI. But you know, she clearly could see, so you know, taken her other diagnosis, because you know, in between we added epilepsy, we added autism, we added intellectual disability diagnosis. You know, this just so overwhelming that this visual diagnosis just kind of goes to the margins. Like, you don't really take it seriously because you have this avalanche of other symptoms. And I'm gonna tell you right now, that was a mistake, and I wish I took it more seriously, especially when she was going into kindergarten. She had this visual it's called visual functional assessment, I believe, because her TVI, teacher for visually impaired from the School for the Blind, noticed that she may have CVI, which this was something, like, to me, that I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what therapy make any kind of difference. And it's one of the conditions that therapy does make a visual conditions that therapy does make a significant difference. So she was diagnosed, you know, with this functional assessment by the teacher of visually impaired, this therapist for vision, with CVI, which I really didn't, you know, I was like, okay, that's fine, you know, they can provide services for her in a public school district, and so she would still was followed by this school for the for the blind. Anyway, then, you know, when she finished second grade and she was going to transition to third grade, and you know, the kids are in US or here in Arizona, in our region, they're staying with the same teacher from kindergarten to second grade, and then they're moving on to another classroom, self-contained classroom, when they're in the third grade. So by the third grade, we already knew that the situation she's in, it's not really working for her very well. She does not get enough support to function very well. So we decided that there is a school for the deaf and blind in Tucson. It's a highly specialized school, and it's a sensory school. So we decided that, you know, we're going to place her. It was a very long process. It's out of district placement, very long, very time consuming, but the whole team, you know, her whole IEP team, and everybody worked together to help her, and she was placed in a school for the blind, and it turned out to be the best solution for her, because that school, you know, it's a specialized campus, and it's very hard to imagine if you were never there. And even now, after a year that Kasia was there, it's really hard for me to explain how they work, but I do know that the way they work and the way they approach a child as a whole child was really a great placement for her. And her teacher in a classroom was a TVI teacher for visually impaired, and she was a highly specialized teacher. And for the first time, really, you know, this school addressed all of her issues. So it's behavioral and OT and PT and everything else, but that part about her visual impairment was, I think, I so underestimated that you know, I came now on this crusade of everybody needs to know about CVI because it made such a huge difference for Kasia. So the way they were teaching her, it was the way that she could learn, right? So it really did work for her, and I started to explore and learn about CVI. So what CVI is, it's a brain disability. It's not, there's nothing wrong with your optic nerve. It will not show on MRI. So to diagnose CVI, you have to actually have your recent MRI. So there can't be any optic nerve or any, eye issues, like anatomic issues in the eye. So it's a brain to eye connection disorder. So when you think of a child, Syngap1 child, it obviously makes sense. Now that I think of it, from the perspective of time, it obviously makes sense because children with Syngap have apraxia, right? They have apraxia and ataxia. So apraxia of speech is this disconnection from the brain to your muscles in the mouth, and they can't control their mouth, they can't speak. Ataxia is this disconnection from the body to your brain. They can't control their movements. So like, let's say, your brain may say, I want to, grab a bottle, and they so your brain signal goes to your body, says, I want to do this, but your body doesn't listen, or your body doesn't really do what you wanted to do. There's a disconnection, right? So of course it makes sense that they would have CVI, which is this connection from the eyes to the brain. So the children with CVI, they see things differently than otherwise. Than healthy children. So healthy child sees, hears the dog, sees the dog as the dog is, right? And the children with CVI, they have real trouble with translating that visual signal to their brain and brain to visual signal. So their vision is distorted, but they can see, right? So depending on how severe, there's levels of severity of CVI. So Kasia is in the middle, pretty much. Children with very severe CVI, they have a lot more, blindness than Kasia has. But if you really looked at Kasia, like, you would never know. You would never know that she has a CVI, because you as a person, as a parent, you wouldn't know. She can see the object, she can see a person, she can see, she can see things, but how precise her vision is, that's the question. So for us, it was always very interesting that she can't see the depth, like the stairs or the curves. She just can't see the depth, period. Like, she doesn't know, so she still has real problem going down the stairs. Stairs are very hard for her because she pretty much goes on the stairs by memory, but not the vision. So, and curbs and everything like that. So like in her lower visual field, everything's very difficult for her. But so, okay, so we know this now, that she has this visual disability, and we know now that addressing this visual disability, which is the biggest evidence that that this works, because she can learn. If you address the visual disability, she can learn so much more than if she's like immersed in this like environment that is addressing constantly her CVI. She can learn so much more than in a regular environment of like self-contained multi-disability classroom, right? So that was real eye-opening to me, and I'm still learning about CVI, but again, that I know that this works That's why I'm talking to you guys, because you may want to explore if your child has a CVI. CVI does mask oh gosh, what's the word? Intelligence, but that's not. So it makes, I forgot the word. Cognition. Thank you. Cognition. So CVI does mask cognition, and it's a known fact. It's a scientific fact that if you do have a CVI, it can mask your cognition. So the children and adults with CVI, they seem less intelligent than they really are. So to combine this with apraxia of speech and ataxia, and now we add the CVI, our children may appear a lot less intelligent and a lot less. They may seem to have a lot less capacity, intellectual capacity than they really do. And we already know that apraxia is masking cognition, then ataxia a little bit less, but also yes, because if you don't have motor skills, then you can't show a lot of things, right? So all of this combined, to me, it's like a perfect storm for just making our kids seem like they're less capable than they are, because they truly can't control their body, right? So that's what I wanted to tell you guys, that it's very important to address the CVI part of this whole apraxia and brain disconnection situation in Syngap1, because it works. It simply works. So and there are, as much as I don't know how they do it. I mean, I didn't have enough time in Kasia's school, because Kasia's school is actually closing this year, so she won't have an opportunity to continue this wonderful education. I am fighting for it. I don't know, just if you're a praying person, like, send a prayer so I can have more strength, because it's very disappointing to me, but I'm not giving up. But if you I've learned that whatever they do, they're highly specialized people. Whatever they do works, right? It works for Kasia. So it may work for any other kid. And those schools for the blind are they're blind and the deaf. So they're very, very like sensory schools. And of course our kids are all about sensory learning, all about, they have to have sensory input about everything. So it's, if you do have a, first of all, get yourself diagnosed. If you do have a, any kind of visual situation like CVI, who can diagnose it? Definitely a pediatric ophthalmologist or ophthalmologist, preferably somebody who actually does specialize in CVI, but also neurologist. And if you are part of Colorado Promise study, neurologist there is specialized in CVI, and she can diagnose you with CVI, and she can assess you with CVI. So you can go that route. But if you do get diagnosed with CVI, don't take it lightly. I would say it's actually very important to the child's learning. So take it seriously. And if you have a school for the blind, it's sometimes it's a deaf and the blind, yeah, I would highly recommend it. I mean, I can't guarantee all the schools are the same, but the systems may be similar. The whole whole child approach, the sensory learning, it may be similar. And this, and they definitely do know about CVI. So I highly recommend it, and I'm going to go because I'm going to pick up groceries. But get assessed, because it's vastly underdiagnosed. It may make a huge difference, bigger than you think, in your child's development. And well, good luck everybody. If you have questions, or you want me to share, you know, individually her Kasia's like the assessment for TV for nystagmus, and if you want to talk, just please reach out, Beata at curesyngap1.org, and or you know, you have my phone number, you have me on the social media, and just reach out if you have questions. Anyway, see you later, alligators. Bye.